Today I'm going to talk about the subregions of Canada, and there are four of them, and you will need to know them for your test or your big quiz over Canada. And we're going to start by looking at the Atlantic provinces. And the Atlantic provinces are the four that are outlined in red right here. One of them is Newfoundland and Labrador, which is this part in the mainland, and then the island right here. We have Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. And those are the four provinces that make up the Atlantic provinces. And I decided to be nice and I typed out your notes for you. So when I click on the marker, your notes will be there. If you want to pause it and write them down before I go over them, that is fine. But the Atlantic provinces, okay, harsh lands and small populations. So out of this whole red area, it only makes up 8% of the population in Canada. And where those people actually live are in the bigger cities, like Halifax, Nova Scotia, St. John, and New Brunswick. And if we zoomed in, you'd notice that those cities are in coastal areas or by the water because they do a lot of fishing. You're not going to find much farming in these areas because only 15% of the land in Nova Scotia can be farmed due to hills and poor soils. So the economic activities that you find in the Atlantic provinces are logging, fishing, mining, and hydroelectricity. So that's why it makes sense that a lot of those cities are coastal regions. So those make up your Atlantic provinces. As we move to the west, we go into Quebec and Ontario, the blue ones. These are known as the core provinces. These core provinces, or just these two, Quebec and Ontario, make up 35% of Canada's agriculture, 45% of the mineral output, and 70% of the manufacturing. A huge percent of Canada's population resides in this area. Almost 3 out of every 5 Canadians would live in one of these two provinces. And Ontario is the largest province in terms of population, majority in English-speaking people, and Quebec is the largest in terms of land area, and that's the largest French-speaking province. Ontario is home to the federal government, and that can be found in Ottawa, so in Ontario. That makes up our core provinces. To the west, we have 3 more provinces that make up the prairie provinces. These are Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. And the nickname for these prairie provinces is Canada's breadbasket. Just like we looked at America's breadbasket in the Midwest, the prairie provinces are Canada's breadbasket. These 3 provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, alone account for 50% of Canada's ag. It's not just a farming area though, because 60% of the mineral output comes from here as well. And this is just another example of why this area could be called a breadbasket. Alberta itself is home to the nation's largest known deposits of coal and oil and produces 90% of Canada's natural gas. The prairie provinces are home to many diverse people. Immigrants that live in this area come from countries such as Germany, Scandinavia, Ukraine, Poland, France, India, Japan, Lebanon, and Vietnam. So now we've covered 3 of the subregions of Canada. And if you notice, we've only covered 9 of the 10 provinces, and we still have 3 territories. The last province is in British Columbia, and we call this the Pacific Province because it is bordered by the Pacific Ocean. This is the westernmost province in British Columbia. Nearly all of its province lies within the Rocky Mountains. So this would be a highland region. When we looked at our main themes of geography, this would be a highland region because it's in the Rockies. Most of the country is over 3,000 feet of elevation. Most of the population is found in the southwest because the further you get north, the worse the climate is in tundra regions. And like in other areas of Canada, most of the economic activity that takes place in British Columbia is logging, mining, and hydroelectric power production. Vancouver is located in British Columbia, and that is Canada's largest port. If we move north, we come into the 3 territories, and that's the Nunavut territory, this really large one with all the little islands, the Northwest territories in the middle, and the Yukon territories, which border Alaska in the west. When we look specifically at the territories, we can see that they make up 41% of the country's land mass. So it's a really big area, but a really small population because it's mainly wilderness with harsh climates. They do have industry, or they have mining and fishing and some logging that take place in the territories. So there is a population there, just a lot smaller than the rest of it. These places, like the logging places and the mining, they're really scattered, and that's why we can see that the settlement in Canada is so dispersed. But if we look at it as a whole, we can see how the territories and the British Columbia province make up the Pacific and the territories region. We have our plain regions in the middle, right here, the prairie provinces. Then we have Ontario and Quebec, which make up the core provinces. And we have Newfoundland, Labrador, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and we have Prince Edward Island, which make up the Atlantic provinces on the east coast.